The city was quiet that night, covered in a blanket of snow. Street lights glowed softly, their light falling on empty sidewalks and frozen roads. The wind was sharp, carrying flakes of snow that danced in the air. It was the kind of night when most people stayed inside their warm homes, safe from the cold. But not everyone had that choice. At the far corner of the street, a young nurse named Maya stood at a lonely bus stop. She wrapped her thin coat tightly around her body, but it was not enough. Her hands were cold even inside her pockets, and her shoes were wet from the snow. She had just finished a long shift at the hospital, and her body ached from the hours of standing and helping patients. Maya's heart was strong, but her face showed her tiredness. She had worked through the day without rest, moving from one room to another, caring for those who needed her. She didn't complain, not even once, because this was the life she had chosen. Still, as she waited there in the freezing wind, she wished the bus would arrive soon. Minutes passed. The street was silent except for the sound of the wind. She looked down the road, but no headlights appeared. She hugged herself tighter, her teeth gently knocking together. The hospital had been warm, but now, standing outside, she felt the cold sink into her bones. A thought crossed her mind: why do I always have to wait like this? But she quickly brushed it aside. Complaining would not help. She was used to difficulties. Life had taught her to be patient, to endure. Just as she was about to turn away and start walking to find some other shelter, she heard the low hum of an engine. A black car, sleek and shining even in the falling snow, slowed near the bus stop. Its windows were tinted, but the driver's side lowered, and a man's voice called out. "Why are you standing here like this? It's freezing." Maya turned her head quickly. Inside the car sat a man in a dark coat, his hair neat, his face calm but serious. She had seen men like him before: businessmen, rich and powerful, living in a world far away from hers. His eyes, however, were not cold. They carried something else: concern. "I'm waiting for the bus," Maya replied softly, her voice trembling, partly from the cold and partly from the strangeness of the moment. The man frowned. "The buses are delayed tonight. Roads are bad. You'll freeze if you stay here longer." Maya stayed silent, unsure of what to say. She didn't know him. Why would a stranger care about her? The man opened the passenger door from inside. Warm air rushed out from the car's heater, brushing against her cold skin. "Get in," he said gently. "You shouldn't be out here." Maya hesitated. Her heart beat faster. She thought about her safety, about whether she could trust him. She looked at the empty street, at the snow piling on the ground, and then back at him. His voice carried no force, only kindness. "I don't even know your name," Maya whispered. He gave a small smile. "Daniel. And you don't need to be afraid. I won't harm you. But I can't drive away knowing you'll be standing here alone in this weather." Something about the way he spoke eased her worries. He didn't rush her. He didn't act impatient. He simply waited, letting her decide. Maya took a slow breath, then stepped forward. The warmth from the car touched her face as she climbed inside. The door closed softly behind her, shutting out the freezing air. For the first time that night, her body relaxed. She rubbed her hands together, feeling them come back to life. "Better?" Daniel asked, his tone lighter now. "Yes," Maya said, almost with relief. "Thank you." Daniel started the car again, guiding it slowly along the snowy road. For a moment, silence filled the space between them. Maya stared out the window, watching the snowflakes fall against the dark glass. She wondered why life had placed her in this strange situation, sitting in the car of a man she didn't know, but feeling safer than she had in hours. "You work at the hospital, don't you?" Daniel asked after a while. He had noticed her uniform under her coat. "Yes, Maya answered. I'm a nurse. That must be tiring. Maya gave a small smile. It is. But it's what I love. Taking care of people, helping them heal, it gives me purpose. Daniel glanced at her, his eyes studying her face. She looked tired, but there was strength in her voice. He could see she was not someone who complained about her struggles. She carried them with quiet dignity. You shouldn't have to wait in the cold after such long hours, he said. Maya looked at him, surprised by his words. It's just how it is. I'm used to it. Daniel shook his head. You deserve better. The car grew quiet again, but this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. Maya felt the warmth spread through her, not just from the heater, but from the kindness in his words. Outside, the snow continued to fall. Inside, two strangers sat side by side, brought together by chance on a cold night. Neither of them knew it yet, but this moment was the beginning of something neither could have imagined. The car moved slowly through the snow-covered streets, the tires making soft crunching sounds against the frozen road. Maya sat quietly in the passenger seat, her fingers resting on her lap, still trying to absorb the strange turn her night had taken. Just a few minutes ago, she had been shivering at the lonely bus stop. Now, she was sitting in a warm car, next to a man whose world seemed far away from hers. Daniel drove with steady hands, his eyes focused on the road. The silence in the car wasn't heavy, it felt gentle, like a soft blanket. After a few minutes, he spoke, his voice calm. Where do you live? He asked. Maya hesitated for a second before answering. In the south part of the city. Near the old library. Daniel nodded slowly. He knew that area. It was far, and the buses were often late at night. He glanced at her again, noticing how pale her hands looked even now. You would have had to wait another hour out there, he said, almost to himself. That's not safe. Maya gave a small smile, though her eyes still carried doubt. I didn't have another choice. It happens often. Sometimes the bus comes late, sometimes not at all. Daniel pressed his lips together. He wasn't the kind of man who accepted things as they were. He had built his life by changing situations, by solving problems. And yet, here was this young nurse, quietly accepting hardship as if it was the only path she could walk. He glanced at her again. You're coming with me, he said suddenly, his tone firm but not unkind. Maya turned her head quickly, surprised. What do you mean? Daniel didn't look at her. His eyes stayed on the road. I mean I won't leave you to wait for buses in the cold again. Tonight, I'll take you somewhere warm. You've already suffered enough standing out there. Her heart skipped a beat. She didn't know this man beyond his name, and yet there was something in his voice that sounded final, like a promise. She wanted to protest, to say it wasn't necessary, but the warmth in the car and the kindness in his words held her still. Why are you helping me? She asked softly, almost afraid of the answer. Daniel gave a small laugh under his breath. Because it feels wrong not to. You're out there helping people every day, giving everything you have. And then you finish your work, and the city leaves you standing in the cold. That doesn't sit right with me. Maya lowered her gaze, touched by his words. No one had said something like that to her before. She always thought of herself as just another nurse, one among many. But he made her feel seen. The car grew quiet again, but it was no longer the silence of strangers. It was the silence of two people slowly beginning to understand each other. Daniel reached for a small bottle of water in the car's holder and offered it to her. Here, drink. You must be thirsty after such a long day. Maya took it carefully. Thank you, she whispered. She held the bottle in both hands, warming her fingers around it before taking a sip. Daniel glanced at her once more. So, tell me, he said, what made you choose nursing? Her lips curved into a faint smile, though her eyes looked distant. My mother. She was the kindest person I ever knew. She taught me that caring for others is the best thing we can do in life. She wanted me to follow that path, and I did. Daniel listened quietly, his hands steady on the wheel. He noticed how her voice softened when she spoke about her mother, how her eyes carried both sadness and pride. She must be proud of you, Daniel said gently. Maya nodded slowly. I hope so. I try my best every day. It's not easy. Sometimes I feel so tired I can hardly stand, but then I remember why I'm there. People need someone to care, and I don't want them to feel alone. Daniel felt something stir in his chest. He had spent years building his empire, earning respect and gathering wealth, but he realized he had never spoken with someone like Maya before, someone who measured life not in numbers or success but in kindness. You're stronger than you think, he told her. Maya looked at him, a little surprised, and then quickly turned her eyes back to the window. His words made her heart feel warm, though she didn't say anything. The city lights began to change as they drove farther. Tall buildings gave way to quieter streets, where snow lay thick and untouched. Daniel's car moved smoothly, guiding them through the night. Do you trust me enough to let me take you to my place for tonight? Daniel asked carefully. His voice was calm, respectful. I just don't feel right dropping you back at that cold stop again. You can leave tomorrow whenever you want. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She knew she should say no. She knew it was unusual, maybe even strange. But something in her heart told her she could trust him. She remembered the way he had spoken at the bus stop, the way he had not forced her but simply offered. After a long pause, she whispered, "All right." Daniel gave a small nod, as if he had expected her answer. Good. You'll be safe and warm. Maya leaned back against the seat, feeling the weight of her exhaustion finally settle. The warmth of the car wrapped around her like a blanket, and for the first time in many nights, she felt a sense of relief. Outside, the snow continued to fall. The world looked cold and endless, but inside the car, something gentle had begun to grow, a quiet bond between two strangers whose paths had crossed at the most unexpected time. And though Maya didn't yet know where the night would take her, she felt a small spark of hope, like maybe, just maybe, this man had entered her life for a reason. The car moved out of the busy city streets and into a quieter part of town. Maya sat silently, watching the world outside blur past. Snowflakes drifted gently through the night sky, landing softly on the window before melting away. Her hands were folded in her lap, and though she was warm inside the car, her heart still carried a storm of questions. Where was he taking her? Why was he being so kind? And most of all, why did she trust him enough to say yes? Daniel noticed the quiet look on her face. He didn't want her to feel uneasy. His voice broke the silence, calm and reassuring. Don't worry, he said softly. I promised you warmth and safety. Nothing more. Maya turned to him, her eyes searching his face. He looked serious, but not cold. There was a gentleness in the way he spoke, as though he truly meant every word. Slowly, she nodded, letting herself relax. Soon, the car entered a wide driveway lined with tall trees. At the end stood a large house, its windows glowing with soft golden light. Snow covered the roof and garden, making it look almost like something from a painting. Maya's lips parted slightly in surprise. She had never been near such a place before. The house was not only big, it was beautiful, peaceful, and welcoming in a way she did not expect. Daniel parked the car and stepped out first. He walked around and opened the passenger door for her. The cold air rushed in again, reminding her of the bus stop she had left behind. But as soon as she stepped inside the tall gates of his home, the air seemed calmer, as if even the wind respected this place. This is your home? Maya asked quietly, still amazed. Daniel gave a small smile. Yes. Come inside. You must be tired. She followed him up the steps. The doors opened into a wide hall filled with warm light. A gentle fragrance of fresh flowers lingered in the air. The walls were painted in soft colors, and a fireplace glowed on the far side, filling the space with a golden warmth. A kind-looking woman appeared from another room. Her hair was gray, and her eyes carried the softness of someone who had cared for a home for many years. She greeted Daniel with respect before noticing Maya. "Good evening, sir." "And who is this young lady?" she asked gently. "This is Maya," Daniel said simply. "She's my guest tonight. Please prepare some tea and a blanket for her." The woman nodded kindly and hurried off. Maya stood there, unsure of what to do, feeling out of place in such a grand house. Daniel noticed her hesitation and spoke with a calm smile. "You don't have to feel nervous. Think of this as just another shelter, nothing more. You've worked all day. You deserve a little rest." Maya lowered her gaze. "I don't want to trouble you." "You're not troubling me," Daniel replied firmly. "If anything, I should thank you. You care for people every day at the hospital. Tonight, someone should care for you." Her chest grew warm at his words, though she didn't know how to respond. The housekeeper returned with a tray of tea and a thick, soft blanket. She placed it near the fire. Daniel guided Maya to sit down on a sofa, the warmth of the flames brushing against her cold skin. Maya held the cup of tea carefully, letting the heat spread through her fingers. She took a small sip, and the sweetness and warmth filled her body. A deep sigh escaped her lips before she could stop it. Daniel watched her quietly. She looked so small, wrapped in the blanket, her tired face softening as she finally began to relax. For a moment, he wondered how many nights she had spent like the one at the bus stop, cold, waiting, hoping life would give her a little kindness. "You live alone?" Maya asked softly, breaking the silence. "Yes," Daniel said after a pause. "The house is big, but empty. Most days I leave early and come back late. There are people who work here, but it never feels full. Not the way a home should." Maya looked at him, her eyes filled with quiet understanding. "You have everything, but it must be lonely." Daniel was surprised by her words. Most people looked at his wealth and assumed his life was perfect. Yet this nurse, sitting quietly with a blanket around her, had seen straight through him. "Yes," he admitted honestly. "It is lonely." Maya didn't say anything more, but the gentle silence between them was enough. Later, the housekeeper showed her to a guest room. The bed was soft, the room warm and peaceful. Maya touched the clean sheets, hardly believing this was real. She sat down, her body sinking into comfort she hadn't felt in years. Through the window, she could see snow falling quietly over the garden. She thought about her small apartment, about how cold and empty it would be tonight. And then she thought about Daniel, how unexpected it was to meet him, and how safe she felt under his roof. Lying back, she whispered to herself, "Why does this feel different?" Downstairs, Daniel sat near the fire, thinking of her. He had met countless people in his life, business partners, clients, workers, but none of them had spoken to his heart the way Maya had. She hadn't asked him for anything, hadn't cared about his wealth. She only carried honesty, kindness, and a strength he could not ignore. As the night grew deeper, both of them rested in the same house, strangers yet somehow connected. Neither knew what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time in a long while, Daniel didn't feel quite so alone. And for Maya, after years of walking home tired and cold, tonight felt like a gift, a night when the world had decided to show her unexpected kindness. Morning sunlight touched the curtains of the guest room, painting the walls with a soft golden glow. Maya slowly opened her eyes, her body still heavy from exhaustion. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The bed was soft, the room quiet, and the air warm. It was so different from her small apartment, where the heater often failed and the noise of the city never stopped. When her thoughts settled, she remembered Daniel's house, the car ride, the kindness he had shown. She sat up quickly, worried she might have overslept or troubled him. Maya folded the blanket neatly before stepping out of the room. The hall was wide and peaceful, filled with soft light from tall windows. She heard faint sounds from the kitchen, clinking dishes, the gentle hum of voices. Following the sound, she entered the dining room. Daniel was already there, seated at the long table. A light breakfast of bread, fruit, and tea was set out neatly. He looked up the moment she walked in. "You're awake," he said, his voice calm but carrying a hint of relief. "Yes," Maya replied softly. I hope I didn't trouble you by staying." Daniel shook his head with a small smile. "You didn't trouble me at all. I'm glad you rested. Sit, please." Maya hesitated for a moment but then took a seat across from him. The housekeeper poured tea into her cup and then quietly left them alone. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It felt calm, almost peaceful. Daniel studied her face. She looked different in the morning light, still tired, but softer, calmer. "Did you sleep well?" he asked. "Yes," she said honestly. "Better than I have in months." Something in Daniel's chest softened at her words. He had spent years living in this house, surrounded by every comfort money could buy, and yet he often found himself restless at night. But here was someone who had so little compared to him, finding peace under his roof. As they ate, their conversation began to flow. Daniel asked about her work, her daily routine, and her dreams. Maya spoke with quiet honesty, her voice carrying both strength and weariness. She told him about long hours at the hospital, about patients who cried out in pain, about others who smiled even in sickness. "Sometimes," Maya said, pausing for a moment, "it feels like the hospital is the only place where I matter. At home, I'm just another person trying to survive. But at work, even if for a short while, I can make someone feel cared for." Daniel listened without interrupting. In his world, people often spoke to impress him, to win his approval, to gain something. But Maya's words were simple, honest, and full of meaning. He found himself leaning in, wanting to hear more. "And what about you?" Maya asked after a while, her eyes steady on him. "You seem successful. But what do you dream of?" Daniel almost laughed, but not because it was funny. It was because no one had asked him that in a long time. Most people assumed his dreams were already fulfilled. "I built companies," he said slowly. "I made wealth. People look at me and think I have everything. But the truth is, I don't know what I dream of anymore. I only know I'm tired of being alone." Maya's heart softened. His words carried a loneliness she could feel. She understood him in a way she hadn't expected. "You don't seem like someone who should be alone," she said gently. Daniel looked at her with a faint smile. "Neither do you." Their eyes met across the table, and for a moment, it felt as if the world outside didn't exist. Two very different lives, sitting across from each other, quietly connected by something they couldn't yet explain. After breakfast, Daniel offered to drive her to the hospital for her shift. At first, Maya shook her head. "You don't need to do that. I don't want to disturb your time." But Daniel insisted. "It's not a disturbance. I want to." So, they left together. The drive was calmer in the daylight, the city alive again with people moving through the streets. Maya sat quietly, looking at the familiar roads, but this time everything felt different. She wasn't walking alone. She wasn't waiting in the cold. When they reached the hospital, Daniel stopped the car near the entrance. Maya turned to him, unsure of how to thank him for everything. "You've done more than enough," she said softly. I don't know how to repay you. Daniel shook his head. You don't need to repay me. Just, let me see you again. That will be enough. Maya's cheeks grew warm. She nodded shyly before stepping out of the car. Daniel watched as she walked toward the hospital doors, her white uniform standing out against the gray walls. She looked small, yet strong at the same time. For the rest of the day, Maya carried his words with her. She moved from one patient to another, caring as she always did, but somewhere in her heart, she felt a lightness that had not been there before. And Daniel, sitting in his office later, found his mind wandering back to her. He thought of her tired smile, her quiet strength, and her words about dreams. Two worlds had met over breakfast that morning, one built of riches, the other built of service. And though they were different, both had discovered something they had long missed, the comfort of being truly understood. The next few days passed quietly, yet something had changed for both Maya and Daniel. Maya returned to her regular shifts at the hospital, but the memory of that warm house and the peaceful morning stayed with her. Sometimes, when she walked down the cold corridor or held a patient's hand, she thought of Daniel's voice saying, "You deserve better." Those words had planted a small light inside her heart. Daniel, on the other hand, found his days unusually distracted. His meetings, numbers, and business calls did not hold his attention the way they once did. Again and again, he thought of Maya's face, the calm honesty in her words, and the quiet strength she carried. He found himself waiting for the evening, wondering if he would see her again. One evening, just as Maya was stepping out of the hospital after another long shift, she saw a familiar black car waiting near the entrance. Her steps slowed, her heart quickening. The car door opened, and Daniel stepped out, brushing snowflakes from his coat. "You look tired," he said softly. Maya's lips curved into a small smile. "It was a long day." "Then let me drive you home," Daniel offered. At first, she hesitated. "I can take the bus." Daniel shook his head gently. "No. You won't wait in the cold again, remember." His eyes carried a quiet firmness, but also warmth. She wanted to argue, to say he didn't need to trouble himself, but her heart knew he wouldn't take no for an answer. Slowly, she nodded, and they walked together to the car. Inside, the familiar warmth of the heater wrapped around her. She leaned back against the seat, her body relaxing after hours of work. For a while, they drove in silence. Neither felt the need to fill the air with constant words. It was enough just to sit together. As they reached a red light, Daniel glanced at her. "Do your patients know how lucky they are to have you?" Maya looked at him in surprise. "Why would you say that?" "I've seen how you speak about your work," Daniel said. "You don't just do your job. You carry their pain like it's your own." "That's rare, Maya." Her eyes lowered. "Sometimes it feels heavy," she admitted. "There are days I wonder if I can go on. But then I see someone smile, or whisper thank you, and it makes the weight easier to carry." Daniel was silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on the road. He had spent years leading people, but leadership in his world meant power, decisions, and control. Maya's kind of leadership was different. She led with care, with her heart. And somehow, that touched him more deeply than anything else. When they reached her neighborhood, Daniel didn't drop her off right away. Instead, he parked the car and turned slightly toward her. "I want to see how your world looks," he said gently. Maya was surprised, but she nodded. She led him down the small street where children played in the snow, their laughter echoing in the night. The houses were small, their roofs covered in white. Some windows glowed warmly, while others stayed dark. "This is where I live," she said softly, pointing to a modest apartment building. Daniel looked at it quietly. Compared to his mansion, it was small and plain. But he could see the pride in her eyes as she spoke about it. This was her world, built with hard work and dignity. "Can I come in?" Daniel asked carefully. Maya blinked, surprised. "It's not like your house," she said quickly, almost embarrassed. "I don't care about that," Daniel replied simply. "I just want to see where you find your strength every day." Her heart softened at his words. Slowly, she nodded. She led him up the narrow stairs and into her small apartment. The rooms were simple plain walls, a tiny kitchen, a worn-out sofa, but everything was neat, cared for with love. Daniel looked around with quiet respect. "It's warm here," he said, not meaning the temperature, but the feeling. Maya smiled faintly. "It's all I have. But it's enough for me." He turned to her, his eyes gentle. "You make it enough. That's what amazes me." Maya felt her cheeks warm at his words. She looked away, busying herself with making tea, though her heart beat faster. They sat together in her small living room, sipping from mismatched cups. The silence between them was different now, not empty, but full of unspoken understanding. Daniel placed his cup down and leaned back, watching her. "Maya," he said quietly, "you've shown me something I had forgotten. Real care. Real strength. Not the kind that comes from money or power, but from the heart." Her breath caught, and for a moment, she didn't know what to say. She had never imagined that someone like him, a man who seemed to have everything, would look at her with such honesty. The clock on the wall ticked softly as they sat together, two people from different worlds, bound by something simple yet powerful, respect. When Daniel finally stood to leave, Maya walked him to the door. He paused before stepping out into the cold night. "Thank you for letting me see your world," he said gently. Maya smiled, her eyes soft. "And thank you for reminding me mine is worth something." As he walked back to his car, Daniel realized something had changed inside him. He no longer saw Maya as just a nurse he had helped on a cold night. He saw her as a teacher, someone who had shown him the meaning of quiet strength. And Maya, closing the door behind him, leaned against it for a moment, her heart full. She didn't understand where this bond was leading, but she knew one thing: she was no longer walking alone. Days slowly turned into weeks, and the quiet bond between Daniel and Maya began to grow stronger. It wasn't rushed, and it wasn't loud. It was gentle, like snow settling on rooftops, soft but steady. Daniel often found himself waiting near the hospital when Maya finished her late shifts. At first, she protested. "You don't have to keep coming," she said. "I'm used to walking or taking the bus." But Daniel only smiled in his calm way and replied, "Maybe you're used to it, but that doesn't mean you should be." Each evening, she would step out of the hospital doors and see his car parked nearby, headlights glowing faintly against the falling snow. And each evening, her heart would feel a little lighter, knowing someone was waiting for her. Sometimes, the rides home were filled with conversation, stories about her patients, memories of her mother, and little dreams she held in her heart. Other times, they sat in silence, but it was never an empty silence. It was a silence full of comfort, a silence that said, "You are not alone." One snowy evening, as the car rolled slowly down the quiet streets, Maya turned to him and said softly, "You've changed the way I see kindness." Daniel glanced at her. "How so?" She looked out of the window, her eyes following the snowflakes. "I used to think kindness always came from people like me, nurses, caretakers, those who serve. I never expected it from someone like you. You've shown me that kindness can come from anywhere, even from the busiest corners of the world." Her words touched him more than she could imagine. He had spent years surrounded by wealth and people who admired him for his success, yet here was Maya, thanking him not for money but for kindness. It was a kind of respect he had never known before. Daniel slowed the car near her street but didn't stop right away. Instead, he parked under a lamppost, the golden light falling on the snow around them. "I wasn't always kind," he admitted quietly. For years, I only cared about winning. I thought success meant power, numbers, and control. But then I met you, standing at that bus stop in the cold, and I realized I had forgotten something important. What good is success if it doesn't make you human? Maya's chest grew warm at his words. She didn't answer right away, but the silence between them said enough. After a long pause, she whispered, "I'm glad you stopped that night." Daniel turned to look at her. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world outside faded away. Snow fell softly against the windows, but inside the car, there was only stillness and quiet understanding. Neither of them spoke further. It wasn't necessary. Sometimes words were too small for the feelings that grew in silence. Over the next few days, their connection deepened in little ways. Daniel brought her warm coffee during her breaks, leaving it on the hospital counter with a simple note, "Don't skip meals." Maya, in return, once invited him to join her for lunch in the hospital cafeteria. He could have eaten in the finest restaurants, yet he sat there with her, sharing a simple sandwich, as if it was the best meal in the world. It wasn't the grand gestures that built their bond, it was these small, quiet moments. One evening, Maya finished her shift later than usual. She stepped out of the hospital, expecting the dark, cold street. But as always, Daniel was there, waiting. She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You really don't give up, do you?" she teased. Daniel smiled. "Not when it comes to you." Her cheeks warmed at his words, and for a moment, she forgot the exhaustion of her day. That night, instead of driving straight home, Daniel took a slower road that passed through the park. The trees stood tall, their branches heavy with snow, and the street lamps cast golden circles of light on the ground. They stopped near a small frozen lake, its surface glittering under the moonlight. Daniel turned off the engine, and the car grew quiet. For a while, they just sat there, watching the peaceful scene. Then Daniel spoke softly, almost like a confession. "I never told you this, Maya, but before I met you, I felt like something was missing in my life. I had everything, yet nothing felt real. But when I'm with you, even silence feels full." Maya's heart beat faster, but she didn't look away. "I don't know why," she whispered, "but I feel the same. I never expected our paths to cross, but now. I can't imagine walking out of the hospital and not seeing you there." A quiet smile touched Daniel's lips. "Then I won't stop waiting. Not now, not ever." The words hung in the air like a promise. Neither of them said more. They didn't need to. Their bond had grown beyond words. It was something unspoken, something felt in the heart. As the snow continued to fall outside, they sat together in the warmth of the car, side by side. Two lives, once so different, now gently weaving together. Winter slowly gave way to spring, but the bond between Daniel and Maya only grew stronger. The nights of snow, the quiet car rides, the warm coffees, and the unspoken promises had tied their hearts together in a way neither expected. Maya often thought about how her life had changed. She remembered the cold bus stop, the long nights of walking alone, the heavy burden of her work. But now, every time she stepped out of the hospital doors, she no longer felt alone. She knew Daniel would be there, waiting. That small truth had become her comfort, her strength. For Daniel, the change was even deeper. His days used to be filled with meetings, contracts, and endless numbers. Success was all he cared for, yet none of it filled the emptiness inside. But since that night when he saw Maya freezing at the bus stop, something had shifted in him. Life no longer felt like a race to win, it felt like a gift to share. One sunny afternoon, Daniel invited Maya to the countryside, away from the busy city. He wanted her to see a place he rarely showed anyone, a small house surrounded by fields, a place he had kept hidden from the noise of his world. When they arrived, Maya stepped out of the car and took in the sight. The house stood simple but elegant, with flowers beginning to bloom around the garden. Birds sang softly, and the fresh air carried the smell of spring. "It's beautiful," Maya said, her voice full of wonder. Daniel watched her as she walked slowly toward the garden. For years, this place had felt empty to him. But with Maya here, it felt alive. "This was my father's house," Daniel explained quietly. "He built it as a place of peace. I never truly understood it until now. I used to come here only to escape work, but it never gave me peace. Not until today." Maya turned to him, her eyes warm. "Maybe it wasn't the house you needed. Maybe it was someone to share it with." Her words settled deep in his heart. He realized she was right. They spent the afternoon walking through the fields, laughing about little things, sharing small stories. Daniel told her about his childhood summers there, and Maya told him about how she used to plant flowers with her mother in their small backyard. Their lives had been so different, yet in these simple moments, their worlds felt close. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink, Daniel stopped near the garden gate. Maya turned to look at him, sensing he had something on his mind. "Maya," he said gently, his voice calm but steady. "The night I met you, I didn't just see a nurse waiting at a bus stop. I saw someone strong, someone who gives even when she has nothing left for herself. You've taught me more about kindness than I ever learned in my whole life. And because of you, I've changed. You've given me back something I thought I lost, my heart." Maya's eyes filled with emotion. She tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat. Daniel took a small breath and continued, "I don't know what the future will look like. But I know I want you in it. Not as someone I meet at the hospital doors, not as someone I drop home after work, but as someone I can walk beside, every day. Will you let me share my life with you?" The world seemed to grow quiet around them. The air, the sky, the soft rustling of leaves, all of it felt still, waiting for her answer. Maya's heart raced, not with fear but with a deep, steady warmth. She thought of the nights he waited for her, the simple kindnesses, the way he listened to her stories as if they were treasures. She thought of how safe she felt in his presence, how her life felt lighter with him in it. Finally, she whispered, her voice soft but sure, "Yes, Daniel. I will." His face lit up with a smile, not the confident smile of a man used to winning, but the humble smile of a man who had finally found what truly mattered. In that quiet garden, as the sun dipped below the horizon, they stood side by side, knowing this was not the end of their story but the beginning of something new. The days that followed were filled with hope. Maya continued her work as a nurse, caring for others with her gentle heart. Daniel continued his business, but with a new perspective. He gave more time, more attention, and more compassion to those around him. Together, they balanced each other. Maya taught him the beauty of small things, and Daniel gave her a world where she no longer had to struggle alone. One evening, months later, as they walked hand in hand through the garden of that countryside home, Maya looked at him with a quiet smile. "Do you ever think about that bus stop?" she asked softly. Daniel chuckled, squeezing her hand. "Every day. It reminds me that sometimes, the greatest changes come from the smallest moments." Maya nodded. That night could have been just another cold walk home. But instead, it became the night my life changed. He looked at her, his voice warm. "And mine too, Maya. Because that was the night I found you." They stopped near the gate, where the flowers were blooming bright under the soft evening sky. For a moment, they simply stood there, grateful for the journey that had brought them together. Their story had begun with cold, snow, and silence. But now, it was filled with warmth, light, and love. And as the stars began to appear above them, both knew that the future, whatever it held, would be a path they would walk together side by side, heart to heart.